First of all, members, could I mention the fact that we've got so many visitors here this morning, and we've got Margaret Foy from the Healthy High Street Falkirk who wishes to talk. So I think we can give permission for that. Margaret, whenever you're ready, if you want to speak. But thanks for coming along, and thanks to all the rest of the business people that have came along. Hope you enjoy your morning. So just come forward, you'll get a mic. Can we get a mic there? Are you covering this side?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name's Margaret Foy and I'm the chair of the Healthy High Street Group. For those who don't know about the group, we are a retailer group. We're a mixture of independents and nationals. We meet once a month in the town centre, and many of them are here today in the galley. We discuss trade across both independents and nationals. We talk about common issues, common opportunities, and we work together to find solutions to make Falkirk Town Centre better. The Healthy High Street Group, many of whom, as I said, are here today, welcome the opportunity to present at today's committee hearing. Based upon analysis and recent consultative review we have conducted with Falkirk Town Centre businesses, the Healthy High Street Group firmly believe that without considerable investment and regeneration, the future of Falkirk Town Centre is severely at risk. We call upon Falkirk Council to urgently commit to relocating the Town Hall Arts Centre and Council Chambers to Falkirk's traditional town centre. These facilities, and as many council officers as possible, must be based from a suitable location within the Business Improvement District, and the project implemented as a matter of urgency, certainly aiming to deliver this project within the next 2-3 years. Why? Last month, the Scottish Retail Consortium reported that Falkirk has suffered the biggest loss in Scotland of its retail workforce, which fell by a staggering 27%. Falkirk had the highest reduction in shop numbers in Scotland at 15.24%. Falkirk has also slipped from 6th place to 18th place in the retail rankings and will decline further without major change. Falkirk Town Centre is making headlines for all the wrong reasons. But, unlike most towns who will face similar challenges, we have a golden opportunity to turn this around. If you can put politics aside and come to an agreement across all parties that you want to stem the decline by not only leading but inspiring change, we can create positive headlines declaring Falkirk is open for business. Many local businesses, a number of whom are here today, invest heavily in this town, from buying and upgrading properties, creating jobs and driving spend in the local economy. National retailers are closing every week, and if the council do not demonstrate their commitment by investing in the traditional town centre, it is likely there will be a house of cards effect in the town following the closure of M&S. Many national stores have posted profit warnings and trading concerns, with town centre stores earmarked for closure over the coming years. Boots are now worried that M&S have set the precedent for withdrawing from these type of properties, and we all know that others will follow. Granting consent for a retail park without appropriate conditions being imposed on the types of permitted trade so close to the town centre changed the dynamic of the town centre years ago. We have actively been fighting against widening the consent of Central Retail Park for the past 10 years, and the current struggles of the traditional town centre can be traced back to the retail park decision made by Falkirk Council. placemaking opportunity could be your chance to fix the problem and benefit the whole town. The Howgate is likely to be up for sale by the end of this year. And if potential investors can see a future in this town, they're more likely to invest. Please also bear in mind that the current threat to national businesses will also affect the retail park, which is currently also up for sale, as they rely solely on nationals. Falkirk will be in an even weaker position if we do not have a modern, mixed-use town centre with strong independents who can be Falkirk's competitive advantage in a sterile retail market. The Healthy High Street Group recognise what the Council have done to intervene to date with investment in the churchyard and the THI works, which do all make a difference. However, something major is now required to support the future of our historic town centre. There is deep frustration from both the public and businesses regarding the lack of pace for the decision on the new headquarters, and it would undoubtedly breathe new life into Falkirk's traditional town centre. A number of options were previously submitted, and the retailers are grateful a decision was not made to relocate out of the town, which would have been catastrophic. We also noticed the submissions included a proposal for Meeks Road, which town centre businesses are strongly against, as the impact of retailers moving to the retail park has already been devastating. To push an additional development to this area would not be favoured. The Howgate landlord has made it very clear if the council were to choose the Grenston site or any location out with the core town centre, they would walk away from Falkirk and the centre could be back with the bank, as finding a new landlord would be unlikely. We need all councillors who serve under Falkirk Council to stand by their town centre first principle and make a quick and strong commitment across all parties to put politics aside and consider not only the future of our town centre, but the positive impact this investment could have on the whole district. We do not have time to debate this for another year. We need you to come together now so that you can instruct your officers to proceed with the procurement process to review possible sites and costs by the end of this year. We're pleased to see that Falkirk Town Centre is part of the investment zone business case, but that will remain meaningless unless there is an inspiring and structured plan for the headquarters. And with this additional investment in the town centre, this will make even greater impact on the investment zone. Other towns are fighting back. Councils are actually borrowing money to buy properties for placemaking purposes. This gives a source of income to help offset the budget cuts which all councils are facing. These councils are pragmatic and forward-thinking. It is widely recognised that for town centres to survive, councils must take the lead and have a clear town centre vision, with other Scottish towns already doing this, such as Dumbarton and Kilmarnock. This opportunity will not come around again, and that is why these local businesses are here today to show you what this decision means to them. We urge you to be bold, think big, make a decision as a matter of urgency to not only move forward, but instruct your officers, but to work together across all parties for the good of this town and deliver a new arts and civic centre and council offices to the heart of Falkirk Town Centre. We call upon Falkirk Council to lead by example and open your door to private developers who we know are keen to invest in this town. Like the city mothers and fathers before you, please remember why you wanted to be a councillor and do what is best for this town, regardless of which administration delivers this project, so that when your time in council is up, walk away knowing your legacy was to leave the heart of this district in shape for generations to come. Thank you.
you would be prepared to take questions, would you?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be mindful when we're asking Margaret the questions that she's not a politician, so just remember that. But she should be able to answer any questions you should put forward. Then, given that the people here are business people, we'll move straight to the item on the agenda, item 5, and then we'll go back later on. But go to item 5 straight after Margaret finishes asking questions. Anybody any questions to Margaret? Councillor Nicholl.
Margaret, first of all, can I reassure you and re-echo a plea that I made perhaps 2 years ago when I said that Falkirk Town Centre will only move forward when the council finds something that it can agree on in terms of regeneration through providing new civic buildings. So I think we'll be pushing at an open door, certainly as regards the support for the idea of a town centre project. We all see that as vital to regeneration in a sensible way to be the catalyst for regeneration in this area. What worries me, and as I've said in a number of emails to no doubt people who are present here, is that because it has to follow rules and regulations, sometimes the council, and that frustrates me as well, is never as quick as what anybody would want it to be. And you quoted 2 to 3 years as being a realistic timescale. The paper quotes anything up to 5 years for a realistic timescale. And certainly, whilst I accept that this will be a very important part of the regeneration of the High Street, quite clearly we need other things as well to fill the gap between this building being completed, if hopefully it gets to go ahead, and to assist the town centre shopkeepers in a more urgent and practical way. So hopefully through you, convener, there will be the opportunity to have some suggestions put forward to fill this gap, because the town centre needs urgent regeneration, urgent other ideas to help it get through until the building comes into being, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, or indeed the worst case scenario in the paper 5 years. So hopefully, as I say, that you'll allow that conversation, convener.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Nicholl. I'm not sure if that was a question or a statement.
Can I go back on it anyway, Councillor?
Yes, certainly you can.
Councillor Nicholl, I think the point we're trying to make here today is we need the decision made to commit to the town centre. We need a vote of confidence. So we need you to agree today to say we agree that the location will be the town centre. The discussion for where it goes and how much it costs is not for today. That's another conversation. But we need you to actually make the agreement that you will move to the town centre, somewhere in the town centre, in some form, and that's another discussion. But the businesses need you to commit to the town centre. Some of these retailers have a lease up next month. They need to know why they should renew that lease. You can do that today by saying, we will commit to the town centre.
I think I've already indicated that there is a commitment to the town centre, and my point is that it may not, even that commitment may not be good enough because of the time that would then evolve before the building is built, because of all the necessary process that has to be gone through. We need more urgent action in the meantime.
I appreciate that, but we also know there's a lot of private developers looking to do things, so whilst it might take a few years for this project to be completed, the fact it will be happening is enough for other developments to start, which will see us through the next few years.
Fine. Again, anyone got any questions? I don't think there will be any difficulty at all. I'd be astonished if there were on this committee today committing to the town centre. No, I'd be astonished if that was the case. It's been the case for since 1980 when I came here at first, but it is in dire need of support, and we want to give them that support. But it's questions. Does anybody get any questions for Margaret before we move on to the agenda? Okay, Margaret, thanks for that. You can listen to the debate. Okay, we'll move straight to the agenda. Councillor Nicholl John, would you like to move? Talk to your report.
Yeah, thank you, Convener.
Fine, carry on.
As requested, the decision of the Executive on the 15th of May the administration was tasked with bringing forward our vision and proposals for the re-provisioning of a new council headquarters and arts centre, and that's within the paper that we have in front of us today. Our commitment contained within our election manifesto is, however, far more than that. Our focus is on regeneration and revitalisation of our town centre, bringing a new sense of purpose, and recognise that we as a council can, in seeking to meet our future business needs, have a significant positive and catalytic impact in doing just that, in creating inward investment and economic growth. It's accepted and agreed that the current municipal buildings and town hall are at their end of life and no longer fit for purpose. We're not alone in that, as many other councils throughout the country look to rationalise their buildings, are looking at re-provisioning, in keeping with the demands of the modern ways of working and the changes in the service demands by our citizens and service users, while at the same time seeking to improve services and deliver efficiencies. Our town centre has significantly changed over the last 10 years, as has the way people shop as a result of the increase in internet shopping. In Falkirk, we don't need more retail space, we need to use what we have to better effect and in different ways, which will create footfall to sustain the economic viability of the existing businesses and drive demand for new. In taking a key decision to locate an arts and civic centre, at least the equivalent of what we have in the current site within the heart of the town centre, we can start to drive that change. Further potential areas that we can play a key role in is increasing the number of people living in our town centre, developing a housing strategy. With the new Forth Valley College emerging quickly and due to open in 2019, there is a demand for student accommodation, and locating that within the town will have a positive effect, as well as more hotel accommodation. This will help drive demand for hospitality and retail, boosting both daytime and nighttime economy. Falkirk has become a tourist destination, third highest in Scotland. However, our town centre has dropped from 7th to 18th in the ranking of town centres. I believe that can be turned around. That view is also supported by professionals who are far more experienced and knowledgeable than I. A recent visit from Architecture and Design Scotland, Scottish Futures Trust and Scotland Towns Partnership have seen the potential in Falkirk. With the right investment and are supportive of the vision and want to work with us to help develop that vision and projects that will deliver a vibrant town centre with a sense of community and purpose for all who live and work and visit. And that will be part of a workshop that's detailed within the papers later next month, and that will be open to retailers as well to come along, because I think their views are very, very important in helping shape our town centre. Town Centre Working Group that has been set up is informal, set up by my colleague, and is working well. The informality allows it to be innovative, dynamic and responsive, particularly in areas where the council cannot, due to our governance and procedures. The working group will grow and develop if it's allowed to deal with town centre issues. It's not about the politics, particularly if it's not about the politics we have seen recently in Falkirk. Partnership is key to being able to deliver the step change that's required, and the council cannot alone deliver anything that is required to create a sustainable town centre, nor can we afford to do so. We recognise there is a need for investment, and that is reflected within our bid to the government as part of our growth deal. We, however, are the stimulus and a partner who can help break down the barriers and facilitate others who are willing to invest, and that comment that was made by Margaret is very much part of that. And again, the comments with the working group, we would like to see short-term initiatives brought forward that will help sustain in the short term as we work towards our larger goal and prize of creating far more footfall within the high street, and whatever way we do that. Affordability, whatever size of building, has to be considered with the project. 60 million plus budget gap over the next 3 years. We need to make sure whatever we agree is deliverable and affordable, and that is a key factor. The bigger the new build, the more costly it will be, and the increased borrowing the council will have to make. That has a knock-on impact to all other aspects of the council's budget. We will then have to make decisions on what our priorities are and what in turn will impact on other parts of the council services and other areas of investment. That said, the option of doing nothing is not available to us. Therefore, it's important that we are realistic in what is possible over what is desirable. This is beyond party politics and needs the support of the whole council. I would therefore urge all members to set politics aside and get behind the benefit for the people we represent. We have heard of the real desire for the council to make a decision and get on with things. It's therefore important that we do not delay any further, but move to the next stage in order that we can take an informed view about our sites based on the feasibility and affordability, enabling the council to make a commitment to its investment within the town, give confidence to the business community and seek to forge other partnerships. We now have a window of opportunity right now. If we don't take it, we will lose it, making the hill so much steeper to climb for the future. I hope members can see the need to remain focused of the importance of the economic viability of our town centre and not allow themselves to be deflected into other areas, and to support the recommendations. Recommendations are in section 2, convener, and the key recommendation that I would wish to highlight is that the council officers prepare a business case for the proposed replacement of the headquarters, having regard to the council's financial position, and an initial specification for a replacement office and headquarters facility for a minimum of 300 workstations and associated civic and arts facilities be taken forward. I therefore move the paper.
Thank you, Simon.
Thanks. I'm more than happy to second the council leader and firmly reserve the right to reply.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone else? We will be moving an amendment to the proposal, the motion. I'll be handed out just now. It is really only a technical amendment. Do members require a recess, or are you quite happy to go with it?
I think if we go a couple of minutes,
Certainly, mindful of the importance of the debate and mindful of people's time. Quite happy about it. But you want 10 minutes?
Yeah.
that's
Fine,
fine.
thanks.
Colin, could you join us just for a bit of information? Thank you, convener.
Oh, sorry, forgive me first. I best read out the amendment just for people who may not have seen it. The amendment would be at 2A that the council representation of the working group will be increased to 8 in a number and will be politically balanced. The council has a policy of politically balancing all committees, so that would be that one. Amendment to 2C, initial specification for a replacement headquarters office facility with a capacity larger than 300 and associated arts and civic facilities. I can explain that for you. We feel that 300 is being less than ambitious. It's not a criticism, it's just simply we think it's less than ambitious. We also believe that there's a lack of joined up working. Later in this report, if I could say for a minute, later in this report, there's a report that says we should bring the housing staff, which has been agreed here previously, bring the housing staff to Calendar Square and put them into the library. Now, if you're going to have a new super duper building in the town centre, first of all, it would be a bit harsh, I think, at this time, when businesses are struggling to bring people out to Calendar Square and make it more difficult in Calendar Square for the owners of that particular place. But furthermore, we also believe that the library is in need of major refurbishment. So why would we do major refurbishment to the library, take the housing staff from Calendar Square and put them in the library, when at the same time our aspirations are to bring a really top-class town centre, municipal buildings and leisure centre into the town centre. So that's why we're doing that. That's the reasoning behind that. It's not a criticism. We think you've got to state the fact that we want to bring as many people as we can up into the town centre to increase the footfall for the workers that would be there. Hopefully they'll all come and shop in the town. So that's the reason for the amendment, and I'm happy to hear what members think of it. Councillor Nicholl?
Thank you.
Councillor Nicholl had his light on, Councillor.
But you did invite me to before you chose to.
Ladies first.
You did ask me to respond.
Just carry on.
Convener. Firstly, I'd say that council representation in the working group to increase to 8 by under proportionality. I'm a wee bit perturbed with that in that what you mean by proportionality from the point of view of the council. Because that's talking very much around what was moved at the special meeting. We've already heard very clearly that there's a need to set politics aside. There's a need to have the whole council on board. So if we are talking about being politically balanced, it should be balanced across the council and not based on the political groupings. We would be happy to concede that with that caveat that it is inclusive of all the council, and quite clearly that politics are left at the door, and that is not brought into the working group. Your amendment 2C, I don't see that your explanation has added anything to that. Our proposal in the paper is for a minimum of 300 workstations. I think that leaves plenty of flexibility for capacity to be increased if necessary. Therefore, I don't see there's a requirement for the amendment 2C because it says nothing more than what's already within the paper. But I'm happy to concede the proportionality of 2A, providing it's based on the whole council.
Yeah. Quite happy for that. I take it you mean by the need for an independent on it?
Yes.
Yep. Do you want to do that just now, or do you want to wait? I'm in your hands.
I'm happy to do that just now.
So, and if we're going to have an independent on the committee, does anybody want to move on an independent? Councillor Nicholl.
Provost, just to show our willingness to move. Oh yeah, no, that was no. Okay.
You must know something I don't.
I do remember the days when you were the Provost. Convener, on an 8-member, there would obviously be 3 Labour, 3 SNP and 2 Conservatives. To move things on and to respond to the Leader of the Council in the spirit that she's accepted, I think it is only right that Provost Buchanan, as Provost of the District, does serve on this committee, and I would give up one of the Conservative places to allow the Provost of Falkirk to serve on this committee. Having said that, can I at this stage move on to...
Well, first of all, you don't need to do that. You should hear Mr Murray first.
Right, okay.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I think it may be helpful just to clarify that if there are 8 members proportional to the whole of the council membership, then there would be an independent with a 0.53 entitlement, which would be rounded up to 1, which would give a membership of an 8-member group of 3 SNP, 2 Labour, 2 Conservatives and an independent.
3 SNP. You can say that again.
3 SNP, 2 Labour, 2 Tories and an independent.
Well, okay.
Yeah. So
I'm obviously not complaining. I
So
thought
you're moving Councillor Provost
I
Buchanan.
was being helpful, yes.
Yeah.
For the Conservative members, then I would move myself and Councillor Nigel Harris.
Yeah. And are you moving
And Councillor Buchanan.
Okay. So second for that.
I'll second that.
Right, okay. Labour members?
Convener, I'm happy to move yourself and Councillor Bissett.
Okay. Any other motions? Nominations?
No nominations, no problems, but convener, but I'd like to make a few comments.
Fine,
Okay, thank you for that. The first of all, I have to say that the working group that is established at the moment and is active and has been effective so far was an early commitment that was made by myself when I became the convener or the spokesperson for economic development after the sad demise of my colleague, Councillor Tom Coleman. It was an easy decision to make. We needed something that kick-started the whole process. We needed a method of consulting the town centre community, particularly the traders, but not exclusively the traders. And it meant that we needed to develop partnerships as well. It was always meant to grow. I have to say I'm sorry that Councillor Patrick is not serving on the new working group or the next phase of the working group, as you say, because Councillor Patrick was a very constructive voice within it. And I know it's not PC perhaps to say nice things about your political opponents, but John Patrick was very helpful and very supportive of the direction we were taking, as was the Councillor Pat Reid. And again, I'm sorry that Pat's not included within the Labour nominations. As a provost for 10 years, again, I was fulsome in my praise of Pat as a provost because he genuinely had a desire to work together with whoever had a positive agenda for Falkirk, and that's something that we have to acknowledge. And I'd like to pay tribute to both of those members. The term on the working group was very short, but it was very well received. The working group itself, I made a commitment that when I took on this post, that I would do everything I possibly could to assist Falkirk Town Centre stop getting worse for the first step, and secondly, radically change itself in order to develop in the way that we want it to do. Falkirk is one of the strong areas for tourist growth within Scotland. We have a fantastic new facility in the Forth Valley College being developed. So we met with for example, the principal of Forth Valley College with regards to the issue of student accommodation, and we think that there's work to be undertaken there. There's an opportunity for the town centre community to increase its population, and work has already commenced on that particular front. We need footfall through our businesses, and we need them not just 9 till 5, we need it throughout the night as well in terms of the nighttime economy. And I was very keen to ensure that we began that process. So the working group was all party, genuine all party from day one, and I felt that was important. There was no obligation to put forward anything at that point in time, because the purpose of the working group, the initial purpose of the working group, was to divide the groups in which we could develop the strategy for Falkirk Town Centre. We went considerably further than what was contained within the SNP manifesto, although the commitment to form a working group and look at the issue of regeneration was very much part of that particular process, and part of our thoughts for the last elections in 2017. So the working group started off very much in its infancy as an advisory body and as a body that was designed to develop. I hope it develops in a positive way, because the one thing that can scupper the ambition that has been shown is narrow party interests. And we need people on the group. We need a group with a clear vision for the town centre that doesn't involve party gain. It involves what is best for the people of Falkirk, and in particular for the town centre population. So I'm happy that the next phase was always going to be the development of the working group into a more formal basis. I'm happy that it served its purpose to date, and I'm looking forward to working with the individuals in the future. You'll appreciate, Convener, that we can't confirm our nominations at this point in time because we didn't know what amendment was coming forward this morning. So we'll let the clerk know as quickly as possible who our 3 nominations are for in this development. The issue of where we are and where we want to go is one that will exercise our minds almost on a full-time basis between now and whenever we complete this process, whether it be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. The important thing is that we continue the momentum that's been gained to date and push that forward even faster. That means that we have to ensure that nothing is ruled out, nothing is ruled in at this point in time until we have all the facts together, because it's important that we have that. It's important that when members are making decisions, that the consequences of these decisions are known, and any decision that's taken is taken on the basis of a strategic overview, rather than necessarily any other reason for perhaps ruling out options that should remain on the table until they're fully ruled out or developed, as the case may be. So with that, Convener, I hope that we can proceed. And certainly the working group has been chaired, not by myself, because I felt that if there was a more senior figure within the council who could emphasise the importance that we place on this particular issue, then it was nominating or asking the leader of the council to chair the working group, and she has done an excellent job, and our partners within the town centre movement in the town centre community will recognise that, and I think at this point in time, having paid tribute to the 2 members who are not going to be part of the working group for the work they've done, it's only right that I pay tribute to the leader of the council who has been absolutely first class and justified my request that she chair this particular working group and take the issue forward to the best of her ability, the best of our ability, and the best of everyone's ability that's going to participate within this scheme. So with that, Convener, I think there's enough being said by me on that. I appreciate your indulgence. I think I've gone beyond the 4 minutes, and appreciate your indulgence on that, and look forward to constructive relationships in the near future.
Yep, thanks for that, Mr Alexander. Can I also say to you that I agree with everything you've said, but the one thing I don't agree with is that it should take 3, 4 or 5 years, but that remains to be seen. I think what we want to see here, everyone in the chamber, yourself included, is the quickest possible outcome to this particular problem. It might take 3 or 4 or 5 years, I don't know, but let's work towards that not being the case.
Yes,
and finally,
I did say if.
Yeah, and finally, I agree that the leader of the council should be a post that's held by the chair of this particular group, and it should be the leader of the council at all times that should be the chair of that group. Fully agree with that. Now, anybody else? Councillor Nicholl.
Okay, thank you, Provost. First of all, I'm more than delighted that Cecil remain as chair of this group, also in her position as leader of the council. I think it is right for the reasons that David spelled out there. Could I also thank David for his comments about my colleague, Councillor John Patrick, and after the meeting, David, I'll privately tell you the reasons behind that decision. There's certainly no lack of interest from John and no slight to his abilities, but however, there is a reason for that. Like everybody around this table, and I'm glad that we are singing now quite clearly all from the same sheet, we want this to move forward, but we want it to move forward as fast as humanly possible. And to that end, I just wonder if Cecil would be gracious enough to perhaps accept some small addendums to her recommendation, particularly in regard of 2B, that officers prepare a business case for the proposed replacement headquarters, having regard to the Council's financial position. But perhaps we could tighten that up by putting some sort of time scale on it and report back by a certain time, which I would be happy to take the advice of the Director on. But I think if we do put time scales on it, it does show just how urgently the Council regards these matters. I've been here 34 years and I well realise that things get put in the back burner unless set dates are set for the implementation. So I would be happier if we could agree something on that. And also in the wider area that I mentioned at the very start this morning, the library, the fact that we're taking people out of the traditional high street, i.e. Calendar Square, and moving them to the library does concern me. The library, as we've now heard over the last week or so, does have problems, and I'm just not so sure that this is an idea that we couldn't look at again. Again, I would happily take advice, but if we could, I would certainly give notice that I would move a motion to pause the development of the library as a hub. It just doesn't make sense in view of all we've been saying to take people away from the high street into a building which is going to need very major works at great public inconvenience in the near future. I mean, many hundreds of thousands of people use the buildings at Calendar Square every year, and I'm just thinking that they may well be using the car park, go into this hub and not go near the high street, which is the cry that we heard from Margaret earlier on about people using the retail park. So I wonder if that could also be looked at. And again, I know I'm pushing my luck in a debate about the council headquarters. Perhaps it is time just to get the feeling of particularly shopkeepers and also the wider public about reopening parts of the high street, perhaps some calendar rigs up to Cowwind and allowing traffic to move on that part of the high street also, because I do think that it is important that we start looking at that. My wife has a retail unit, and I know only too well, not in the high street, I hasten to add, but I know only too well the difficulties of being away from traffic. You're not visible, and the problems that has. And Margaret rightly highlighted the effect of the retail park. It's not only the retail park. I mean, for many years I was a Grangemouth councillor, and I know the effect that ASDA has had on Grangemouth town centre. So I'm certainly 100% behind the retailers of Falkirk High Street in what they are looking for. Margaret spoke very elegantly and with passion, and no wonder, because, as I say, I've been here 34 years, and it feels as if we've been talking about this for at least half of that time. So let's move forward together. Let's move forward in the project. Let's put some timescales on to give officers a deadline to work towards. They don't like deadlines, but I'm afraid in these circumstances I think it is necessary. Let's look again at the library. Let's look again at the policy that we've had in the past of all administrations of moving people out with, particularly to Abbotsford House and to the stadium. As a Polmont representative, amongst many other villages, of course, which I represent, I was very concerned, and I can vouch that since we moved education services from Polmont down to Grangemouth, the shops in Polmont have suffered. So that, to me, is evidence that council employees do make a difference economically in the area, and let's unite. This is nobody in particular's vision. This is clearly the vision of all parties on Falkirk Council. Obviously, I can't speak for the two independents, but from those represented today, we all want to move this forward in as fast a timescale as possible. But running along with this, because it is going to take longer than anybody would like, I want us to look at things like pedestrianisation of the high street and whether or not it's sensible to be taking people out to this hub. So, Convener, first of all, could I hear from officers whether it is under standing orders permissible for me to move that the hub project be at least paused until we get a better idea of what's happening here. We're spending a great deal of money there. It could be put to a better use, helping these buildings come even quicker to fruition.
Well, thanks for that, Councillor Nicholl. I always get criticised for keeping to the standing order as regards time. However, it is a very important debate today, and I think there should be leeway for everybody that wants to have anything to say. The library comes under the next item, but Mrs. Greiser, would you like to give any comment at this time?
I'm happy to try to help. Obviously, business cases, as you know, normally are normally moved forward in two parts. There's generally an outline business case and then there's a detailed business case once decisions have been made and
Mrs. Greiser, I'm sorry. I know it's difficult. Could you bring the microphone? Can everybody hear what's being said? I know the microphone is something on it too good.
Okay, I'll endeavour to shout that. If you can't hear me, just put your hands up if you can't hear me. Business cases generally are done in two parts. There's an outline business case which will outline options, and then there's a detailed
Excuse me again, sorry, Cecil, if you put your mic off. That's how it works. If there's more mics on, it makes it more difficult to hear.
If we then move forward to a detailed business case, which is exactly as it's described on the tin. So in terms of your aspiration to move quickly on this, and I have to say that is obviously an aspiration that's shared by officers, it would be possible for us for you to put a timescale on us reporting back on progress, and with us potentially having some outline business case thoughts. In relation to the amendment that's been moved, can I just, for the purposes of my own clarity, understand the amendment suggesting capacity larger than 300?
Yeah.
Do you have a specific minimum number in mind, Councillor Golding? So just so that I'm clear for moving forward.
Well, the specific number in mind would probably be the one that we used the last time we were talking about replacing this particular building.
That's 500.
500, that would probably be the minimum. But it does say in the report as well that there's a figure of 1,200 mentioned in the report.
Indeed, and what officers would do would be to bring forward options, whichever of the parts of the recommendation you set on. If it's a minimum of 300, we would bring forward options up to the maximum. I think if it's 1,000, if it's a minimum of 500, we would bring back options from 500 up to that 1,000.
Yeah,
so it's just really so we can be clear.
Yes, thank you for that.
How we're moving on. So that's helpful for that. So I think that, as I say, we would be looking to bring forward a report on progress. The business case would, the outline business case would endeavour to identify these range of options. It would endeavour to identify outline costs. But these are very much dependent on the site. And the site is the issue that we have to go through the procurement process that you alluded to yourself, Councillor Nicholl. Because obviously the council in the high street, the council doesn't own any properties, so we would be looking to acquire sites, and there would be a site assembly issues. So we can come back relatively quickly, but there'll be caveats on all of the numbers because we haven't gone through the procurement process for the purposes of firming up on acquisition costs and site assembly costs. We can be relatively certain around issues of construction costs, fit-out costs, things like that. But as I say, the issues around the site are going to be critical to the cost. But we can certainly bring back something with as much certainty as possible. I would say probably two meetings from now.
And just following on from that, Convener, I know
you are starting to stretch the bounds a wee bit.
6 or 7 months we leave the European Union, but until then we are bound by their procurement rules. So just to speed up the process, is there anything that could be done through the European Union Journal to put us ahead of the game?
The issue of we have had a request for sites, as you know, we've had a process of doing that. and that process was, and that's been reported back to members, and that process was concluded prior to the Marks and Spencer's announcement. So I think the best thing we can do is to continue discussions on an informal basis in an effort to try and firm up on some of these things. If we go out to a formal procurement process, then there are requirements for that to be, there to be certainty around the outcome of that process in terms of the European rules. And leaving, obviously we don't know what's going to happen next year, and there may well be transition arrangements in place which would leave the EU procurement rules in place for possibly up to 2 years. So I think we have to work within the framework at the moment. I think the best thing we can do is have informal discussions in an effort to try and determine what sites might be available, and then factor that information into our report back to members.
Thanks for that, Mrs. Geiser. I think basically what I'm hearing is we look at all town centre sites as quickly as possible, and please, I didn't want to get involved in the debate about Brexit here this morning. But Councillor Garner, you've not spoken. You want to speak?
Yeah, I do. I just want to touch on the working group nominations. And
well, just on that, Councillor Alexander has agreed that you'll come back with your nominations.
Yes, I want to talk to nominations from your group.
From our group?
From your group in particular. It's good to hear from Councillor Nicholl that there is maybe reasons behind Councillor Patrick, which is quite unfortunate that he's standing down. I find it quite astonishing that Councillor Reid is not being considered and not continuing his good work. I've recently brought together a small working group within Denny, town centre, which there's difficulties in Denny as well, as there is in all towns. And I've included within that Councillor Harris as a local member, Councillor Blackwood as a local member, and Councillor Cawley as a local member. And I find it quite astonishing that your group is not going to have the local member on that working group. I'm assuming there is reasons behind your decision there, but we probably will never know them. But that's the point I'd like to make on that. It's quite strange.
Anything else you want to raise on the report?
No, that's quite all right.
Thanks. Anyone else? Amira? Right, Councillor Kerr?
Just regarding what Mrs. Geisler had mentioned regarding timescales, would it be, could we bring in people in as a temporary basis to get this information, or an outside company to do the analysis on each different site? And it's no any slate on our officers that we've got. It's just if they're taken away from their normal job, it's something that is it something we could look at?
It may be that we will require some external support in terms of delivering this work. Business cases can be very complex things to do, and you're right, my colleagues are very busy with other things, but this is obviously a priority for everyone in the council, and so it will be given that degree of attention. If we require to procure outside support for purposes of moving this project forward, then that will be done.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Bowes.
Again, partly on the time, obviously the size of the project and the amount of seats. If you put a 1200 seat unit in, it's always going to take a lot longer, so you're going to have a big empty building for a lot longer period. So therefore, obviously, for the impact on the high street, size will matter in this case, and it will also matter cost-wise as well, from our point of view. I'm pleased to see that we've moved away from the situation that we've had. I think the last meeting there were suggestions about the old Falkirk Royal Hospital site as well. I'm glad that it's moved and it's moved into the city centre for us as per the leader of the council has proposed, and it's also good to hear that the other parties around the table seem to be going along with that, and it's got to be welcome. Thank you.
My memory at the last meeting or the meeting before, we were talking about taking the staff out of here and put them down Abbotsford House, but we stopped that. So let's not get into the politics of the thing. That's history. That's history. So we didn't want to get into that. What I'm concerned about, before I ask Councillor Michael John to wind up, what I'm concerned about is that sometimes the council doesn't appear to be working jointly. Now, I'm on the planning committee, so I need to be careful what I say, but not too terribly careful. But I think that all the departments of the council now have to look at the decision taken with a view to what's happening in the town centre. Now, that may mean that, for instance, I would be asking planners to go through the proper process, go through the legal process, but always being mindful that if you take retail out of the town centre, for instance, to the gateway, then that's going to impact on Falkirk town centre. As simple as that. So I'm not saying that the planners, because the lawyers are here and everyone's here, I'm not saying that the planners shouldn't do their job as they do to the best of their ability. I'm just simply asking that there's a wee caveat goes in there that says if you're going to receive planning applications and things before taking the decision, be mindful of the impact that that can make on the town centre. Anyone else before we wind up?
Just a reminder, convener, I haven't had a response to my request that the High Street pedestrianisation is looked at as part of some process.
I think I've
Maybe
asked you with
Cecil
that.
will take that up. And also the library, I take it you're pushing me to wait till the next item.
Yeah, well, I've been pushing opening up the High Street for a long time. Councillor Nichols, John.
Thank you. I'm pleased to hear that the other parties share the administration's vision, and it's one that we are very much committed to. As I said in my opening statement, that it was something that was contained within our manifesto, and it's a commitment that we will continue to forge through as best we can. I think we have to also go back to what I said about being careful about what is desirable and what's actually deliverable, and around the size of the building and the bigger the size of the building, the difficulties then become the site and we become constrained. That's why we need to keep everything on the table and keep all options open, otherwise we could be in danger of not being able to deliver what we have promised to deliver in that. I am, however, pleased that Councillor Nicholl mentioned the opening up of the High Street traffic. I'm not adverse to looking at that. I hope through the master planning exercise that once we have something that's much more site specific, that is something that could be explored, or increased or better access could be explored. So I'm very mindful of the demands around that, but we have to also look at the costs of doing that and the constraints that it may then bring as a result. But there may be part of the High Street that could indeed be opened up to traffic and make it far more accessible. The issues around the libraries, I think we'll leave till we deal with the front-facing officers report there. Making decisions about the membership of the working group, it's disappointing that the recognition of the role of the portfolio holder for leisure and tourism is Robert Spears, who is very key to our historic town centre, hasn't been recognised in making up that membership. It's disappointing that that's not been accepted, that there's a key role to be for that particular portfolio holder in that. And that's something that I will look to try and manage as best I can, but that's where I'm concerned that there's perhaps other factors being brought into play there, and it's not as open and transparent as it should be. I'm pleased that we can move forward. The concern about the wording of the amendment and now what's been said about the figures moving from being more than 300 to being 500, I think we have to be mindful again about being able to actually deliver on what we say, convener, and that's something that I think we all have to take a responsibility for. But I have to go back to where we started, that we don't have a choice of doing nothing, we have to do something. Timescales have already been discussed, and we hope to have something back from the procurement exercise, certainly before the end of the year, but something towards the autumn, so that we can actually move forward on. We are constrained in the public sector with processes and procedures we have to follow, but that's not to say that we cannot be talking to our partners to look at how we can enable them to carry out investment within the town centre, because I believe there are great opportunities for the private sector and to work alongside with them. And where there are potential difficulties and barriers, as the convener mentioned in around planning, I would hope that our officers within planning would be able to work with any developer that wished to come forward from the private sector that would be of benefit to our town centre, to try and overcome those difficulties and do it as quickly as possible, and that's recognising the commitment. We have to look again at the short term and what we can do, and that's something that I hope the working group can have discussions with the council and with others about what we can do and what's feasible and deliverable in the short term to help give that confidence and to bolster our town centre while we work towards our long-term goal. But we also we need to be focused on the long-term goal of regenerating, revitalising and repurposing our town centre. I would therefore wish to nominate Councillor Robert Spears as the independent member.
Okay, thank you for that. And can I just say before we move to, I don't think there's been a division, so it's the message coming out here today is that the council executive has agreed unanimously to put all the support we can get into the town centre and try and get something done as quickly as is possible. Okay?
Convener, I have moved Provost as the independent member.
Yep. Right, sorry, I've been corrected. We'll now move to two votes. One on membership of the committee, and two on. I thought the SNP had agreed the amendments about the building. Do you want to go to division on that, the size of the building? The move to 500. I thought we had agreed that.
Well, it's just that you can change it, convener, from being. I'm happy to go with the written amendment, but you changed the verbally from.
At the request of to make it easier for the Director of Law to get the figures. So you're happy with the amendment?
I'm happy to go with the written amendment.
Right, okay, that's fine. So there's only one division, and that's, you now want to have a vote on Councillor, the independent member.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
But as I said earlier, I think it's very appropriate that the Provost of Falkirk be on this very important committee. What can I say? It just seems logical to have.
I think my understanding at the minute is the SNP is going to give up a place to Councillor Spears, is that right?
No.
Right.
Proportionality is 3-2-1.
So,
yes, thank you. As I understand that the only matter that remains to be determined by the committee is the independent member on the working group which has been agreed. And Provost Buchanan has been nominated by Councillor Nicholl, and Councillor Spears has been nominated by Councillor Meikle-John.
Second for that. Did we have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Councillor Hughes, you've seconded.
I'm second, yes.
Fine, thanks.
Councillor Alexander.
Sorry, I missed that.
It's a choice between Provost Buchanan and Councillor Spears.
Yes, Councillor Spears.
Councillor Bishop.
Provost Buchanan.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Coombs.
Provost Buchanan.
Councillor Garner.
Tourism Portfolio Holder. Councillor Spears.
Councillor Goldie.
Provost Buchanan.
Councillor Harris.
Provost Buchanan.
Councillor Hughes.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Kerr.
Provost Buchanan.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Councillor Spears.
Councillor Nicholl.
Provost Buchanan.
And Councillor Nimmo.
With Provost.
Convener, there are 7 votes for Provost Buchanan, there were 5 votes for Councillor Spears, and Provost Buchanan is duly appointed as the independent member.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks to all who came along this morning. Thanks to Margaret in particular for addressing the committee. Now, we're going to go back into technicalities now and go back to the start of the agenda, and that will be any declarations of being advised to close. Right, okay, here we go. So we'll go back again. Any apologies? Any declarations of interest? Minute of the last meeting? That be agreed? Rolling action 18. Does anyone have anything on that?
On page 15318, the steeple convener. Now that this work's all been done, I think I'm right in saying that the box office used to be there, but it's not there anymore. What's going to be put into that site?
Mrs. Geiser.
There is a proposal for the site to be taken over by the Local Historic Society, from which they will offer historic and cultural tours of the town centre. And as I understand it, there will be a small retail offering there as well. There is a requirement for investment to come forward from in the building, and that's being sought from the Common Good Fund. And as yet, that committee hasn't managed to meet, and accordingly the report can't be brought back to members until then. So although we were due to come back today, as you can see from the action log, we'll need to wait for the meeting of the Common Good Fund Committee, which, as I understand, is currently being arranged.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that, Convener. I have fears that the building will just be left with no purpose after doing that, so I'm greatly reassured by the Director's comments.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone else? If we've had the Council Headquarters project, so we'll move to the Strategic Property Review. Mrs. Geisler.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, this report relates to the other part of the Strategic Property Review that members considered in May of this year, when it was decided to hold off progress pending the report that you've just considered. This report relates to the front-facing element of the Strategic Property Review, and in particular the implementation of decisions that members have previously taken about delivering 3 hubs, advice hubs, in 3 localities throughout the district, which are named creatively East, West and Central. Members will be, hopefully many of you will have an opportunity to visit the East locality hub in Grangemouth and see how that's operating. It's operating very well, very good feedback from residents. And the 2 that remain are the West locality hub in Cairnbank House and the Central locality hub within Falkirk Library, as has been mentioned already this morning. And the selection of the library, obviously, as members will recall, was one that was made in March of this year. This report is really to identify the outcome of some of this work, to show that moving forward with this localities model will allow some properties to be declared surplus that will no longer be required. And you can see at paragraph 4.4 of the report there are proposals for the use. Some of these will be repurposed, retained within the council and repurposed, and proposals for others obviously are for disposal, potentially in some cases to the community. As you will know, to augment the hub model, there will be bespoke outreach locations, and work on that is being developed by Stuart and his colleagues. And this will allow us, as we say at paragraph 4.6, to come down from 11 front-facing premises to 5, and thus making the savings associated with that. And paragraph 4.6 provides more detail on the investment that will be required to deliver these localities on a spend to save basis, and there's more detail in the breakdown than that in the appendices to the report. Turning to Cairnbank House, the contract for the phase 1 works has been let, and it's intended completion in October of this year to Maxi Construction, and that project is going well. I think tribute has to be paid to the staff within Cairnbank House for their active participation in this project and dealing with the inconvenience that they have faced. They will be moving to the new models of mobile and flexible working as well, so there's been some significant changes that will require to be made there. As we say at paragraph 4.9, the contractor is currently on site, and the intention for the purposes of delivering best value is to agree that that contract can be extended for works to the balance of the site to be included, and that will all be within budget and budget that's been provided for the project. Paragraph 4.10, the lower ground floor is Cairnbank House is currently used for elderly daycare, and the future use of that facility is linked into the review of elderly daycare services being undertaken by my colleagues in the IGB. As we've identified in the report, you can see in the table, there is investment required, as I've said, to deliver each of these hubs, and but this is an spend to save initiative, and there will be some small savings moving forward. Finally, the central locality hub, the proposal there is to deliver a conjoined facility with the Falkirk Library there. As I say, this was discussed by members in March of this year. Move forward with this project as the preferred location for the central hub, and the proposal in the report is for the purposes of delivering all of these, moving forward with all of these projects, and the recommendations are contained in paragraph 2, convener, to allow the works to be undertaken and completed to deliver on these next phase of the project. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mrs. Geisler. She's correct to say that it's agreed previously that the Housing Department will go into the library. Therefore, standing orders because I don't think anybody here has got, they can't get 2/3, so the members here agree that we should re-look at that particular proposal. I understand that the library itself, the building, I've been informed very recently that it needs a new roof. It's got damp, it's got dry rot, it's no damp rot, it's dry rot, and it's also got a structural problem, and the pub is called the new extension at that particular time.
That's not our understanding of there have been reports undertaken in respect of the building, and there is work that requires to be spent, but it's primarily in conversion of the facilities to the new model of the advice. So Leslie Malcolm knows an awful lot more about it.
So, do we agree to stay with the decision, or do we want to open it up for a vote?
Can I, perhaps, I think if we hear from Leslie, but I think that there's other factors that need to be taken into account, convener. I don't think it's just an easy decision to say that we just put it on pause, because there's a lot of other factors that depend on that.
That's fine, but just before we do that, we need to agree that we're going to discuss it, because standing orders already exist. We've had the decision taken to move, so if we want to discuss it, I'm happy with that. But we need a general agreement. Everyone's agreed to that. Do you agree to that, Councillor Nicholson?
I'm happy to discuss it, but the decision was made by Council, and I think that we are in danger.
There's no point in discussing it then.
Well, exactly, I think.
Right. So if we can't get agreement to discuss or change the decision, I think we should just take it as read. Is that agreed?
Is that because it was in March and this is only August? Or is it something
6 months old.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if there has been new evidence...
To be fair, Councillor Nicholl, I've already suggested that we can't discuss it, so I think, therefore, we just move on. Unless there's something else you want to ask on the report.
Convener, it's unfortunate you added the bit that you did with regards to the condition of the building, because you led a discussion.
Councillor Alexander, I've got to say, it's been a good meeting. I've already said to Cecil Meikle-Joe and to Malcolm Nicholl that if we're not going to discuss it, we can't discuss it. So
you began discussing it.
So we move on for there, that's right. So we move on for there. Is there anything else on the report anybody wants to raise?
I would like to speak to the report, Convener.
Go ahead.
This is actually the next phase in the transformation programme, and it began 2 years ago. And the asset rationalisation, it's important that it be followed through in order to deliver the service changes and improvements, while delivering and service targets which are not achieved will have a knock-on effect to our medium-term financial planning. This is about frontline service delivery through the hub and spoke, and that was developed as a concept 2 years ago. The model of delivery was informed by consultation with those who need the service most. They identified that we needed to move to a more joined-up delivery, more outreach, and also more focus on how to resolve complex problems rather than focus on paying bills. Model is therefore based around providing joined-up service delivery to the people within the hub or at the point of outreach. To deliver the outreach, we need to bring all the frontline hub staff together so that we can provide a good service within the hub, and multi-skilled advisors in the back office to give them more intensive support, and we've seen the benefits of that taking place, particularly in Grangemouth. Allows us to deliver a more enhanced service without any additional resources, using the same staff that we have in a different way, and we couldn't deliver this without moving to the 3 hubs, as we wouldn't have enough staff to be able to do that and offer the outreach. The model allows us to look at what other services we can deliver through the hub and make sense to our customers, rather than continue with public services being delivered by our partners from different offices, and that is one of the key strands to the hub, and that is one of the key strands to having a central hub in Falkirk Library. For example, we're doing work with Skills Development Scotland about co-location in the hubs, offering further joined-up services, and having access to the trust computers, etc. within the hubs makes that so much easier to be able to be done on that single site. And as a result, we are actually also supporting the continuation of our library. If you remember correctly, there was proposals brought forward by the Trust that said they wanted to shut 2 libraries in order to be able to meet their budget demands. We clearly said that we are not closing libraries, and that is still the case, but I do believe we still have to work with our partners in order to be able to achieve all of that, and this is a way of doing that. It is being taken forward. There is funding to do all of this, and it's been done in a spend to save programme. It's to be cost neutral, and therefore I do think that it will actually lead us to actually delivering a much more modernised and more focused service for those that need the greatest amount of support as we move forward, and also will actually improve the services, particularly to some of our outlying areas, whereby we will be able to provide outreach support within some of the smaller villages, not expecting them to come into the centre. So I think that this is progress. It is actually taking forward a transformation, and I think it really will deliver a much better and more focused service. Therefore, I would move the recommendations in section 2.
Second door.
Formally second and reserve the right to come back.
Fine, thanks. Just in case, for the avoidance of doubt, there's nobody's suggestion that we would close a library. What we were thinking was we might move a library into a big new super duper building and bring housing in it as well, and bring footfall on the high street. Okay, anyone else on the report? No? No one else? No one else? Fine, we'll move on then. Thank you. Councillor Garden. Well, I don't know who to speak first. Fine, thanks.
This is the latest report in a series of reports that have been presented to members in respect of delivering a household recycling charter compliant collection service. Members will recall that we last spoke about this in May 2018 when a further option was agreed by members that should be investigated and costed. And that option is now known as option 4, and it is included in the report, both in a narrative form and has now become the norm pictorial form. I'm grateful to my colleagues for being able to deliver that for me. So the report, in essence, describes a current collection service at section 4.2. At 4.3 there was the option that was put forward by officers and for which the previous funding application was made to Zero Waste Scotland, and thereafter is the option 4 that I've mentioned already that was considered by members. The narrative analysis of that option 4 is contained in paragraphs 4, 6, 4, 7 and thereafter, and particularly the paragraph 4.8 highlights the issue of combining food waste with garden waste. And the costs associated with these options are further on in the report under section 8, the financial implications, and you'll see that option 4, the overall impact is 600,500 pounds additional expenditure. The balance of the report relates to an update on the deposit return scheme, which Scottish Government have announced that there would be the introduction of such a scheme, and that's in section 5 of the report. And the rest of that section covers an update as members requested in respect of that scheme. There is a consultation ongoing in respect, not so much around having the scheme or not having the scheme, but what should be included. And this is to focus on single-use plastics for the purposes of increasing the recycling opportunities. And this is very much a trend in the waste world that members will be familiar with. And obviously we discussed the issue of single-use plastics previously here as far as the Council's use is concerned. So to Section 5 updates the work that's being done on there. There's a lot of work still to be done by Zero Waste Scotland in respect of the DRS scheme, and the issues that are exercising them just now are described in paragraph 5. They need to decide what materials are going to be in scope. They need to decide how this is going to work in terms of where they're going to be returned to, what is the financing around this, what are consumers going to be advised about. There's a whole load of issues around infrastructure and logistics to deliver the returns, where are these returned items going to go and how are they going to get to bulking and recycling stations. So these are all things that government through Zero Waste Scotland will have to work on. As you would expect, our colleagues are working very closely with COSLA and Zero Waste Scotland to help them develop this scheme. But as we say at paragraph 5.8, the early indications, and I have to say these are very early indications, that a DRS scheme could be 2 years away from now. So what we're really asking members to consider today is to note the terms of the update in respect of the deposit return scheme, but also to agree on your preferred household waste recycling compliant methodology. That will allow myself to go off to Zero Waste Scotland and submit a funding application for the purposes of delivering this and report back to members on the outcome of the application process. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mrs. Geisler. Councillor Darden.
Thank you, Convener. I'd once again like to thank Rona and her team, Carol and Ross, who's here today, for this report. And as Rona has pretty much covered all, so I won't dwell on it too much. Some of this report is very similar to the one we all read and discussed at the last executive meeting. The update in DRX, which I believe will be a game changer, and highlighting the consultation which is still underway and due to be completed on the 25th of September, as mentioned. And in 4.6 and 4.7 it describes the analysis of the option 4 brought forward before the executive on the 15th of May. There is a comprehensive analysis in 4.8, and it is noted that other local authorities have combined food waste with garden waste, and listed are the pros and cons within this. I've gave Jack a motion there to circulate if Jack wants to kind of pass that round. I'd like to give some insight into my thoughts behind this motion so there's nothing surreptitious within the wording. This option, once costed, may prove to be the best option for a few reasons. Mainly, it is charter compliant, which this council agreed to a few years back, collecting separately paper and card in one bin and plastic and metals and cartons in another container. It will reduce the current £1 million overspend, in my opinion, by decreasing contamination within the current blue bin collection service. It builds in some flexibility with DRS on the horizon. When DRS does come in, the deposit return scheme, I'm sure it's inevitable there will be a reduction in the material collected by the council services. There is a risk to changing the collection service before the implications of DRS are fully known, but I feel this model's flexibility covers that best. And this will cause the least disruption to residents, as they will have the same amount of containers as they have currently. We must address the current forecast £1 million overspend. Of that there's no doubt, due mainly to contaminated blue bin materials. We must produce higher quality material as required by the market. We need to give residents a service that best fits their needs, and we need to do what is best for the environment by reducing poor quality contaminated recyclate heading to landfill. Hopefully this motion will receive cross-party support from all members. Thank you.
Many thanks. I think we'll have a recess for 10 minutes, okay?
Yes.
This motion is to accept recommendation 1, replace recommendation 2 and 3 with the following: instruct the Director of Development Services to undertake an analysis of the final option described pictorially below and report back to the Executive on the implications of this option where a decision will be made. So, anybody any comments to make on the
Convener, can I second it? Formally first and reserve the right to it.
Yeah, no problem. Any comments? No comments? Councillor Nicholl?
In regard to the proposal that's come forward from Paul, the one thing that strikes me as presenting a problem, hopefully I'm typical of most households in that the blue bin seems disproportionately filled with, I think you call them Tetra packs and milk cartons and iron brew cartons, bottles, and that sort of thing. And it's not that I don't read very much, Convener, I do, although I suppose I follow mostly the modern trend of reading news on the internet, so I certainly don't have the papers that I used to have. As you get older, you tend that you don't want to receive so many birthday cards, so I don't generate all that much card either. So it just seems out of proportion to have paper and card in a huge 240 litre bin and a tiny little box for all the different sorts of bottles and milk cartons, etc. And indeed cans as well. It's just out of proportion. I mean, I think there might have been an argument to have it the other way around, to have the cans, the plastics and the cartons in the big bin and paper and card in the small bin. There might have been an argument to be put up for that. But as it stands just now, I certainly couldn't agree to it because of the reasons I've just given. It's just not sufficient there for modern living.
Well, I prefer you to wait since you're reviewing and getting in your...
You just asked me a question.
Well, if you want, I think that's...
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yara rarity. I've got a breakdown of what the actual makeup of the blue bin here, and by far the biggest percentage is cardboard and mixed papers. It takes up something like 56% of it, but if you look into rejects, which is soil stuff, things that shouldn't be in the bin, that takes up 24% of the bin actually, which is shocking. But looking at mixed plastic, steel cans and all cans, it only takes up just over 22%. So you're one of the ones that's...
The Tetra packs and the iron brew bottles.
That's the same thing, that's your mixed plastics. But DRS coming into play will change this, will change what's the makeup of the bins, it will change up what the makeup of the black boxes that we already have as well. So there has to be flexibility built in, because DRS is at least 2 years away. So if someone, like just now, they have too much recycled material, we do give them a larger blue bin if that has been proven. So this is the exact same. Instead of having one carton, you can actually have two, and they stack quite neatly on top of each other. So if you have that issue, that can be covered. That's how the flexibility is in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You did promise that we could see the size of this proposed bin. Do you have one there?
You want me to run to the office with my crack threads and bring one of the bottles? I can do that.
Right, whilst we're waiting on that resolution, Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Convener. I very much agree that we do need to do something, and I care for the environment, and as much as I've got an electric car and I compost my garden waste to save the council from lifting it. Obviously, if this proposal goes ahead, then I will have to put my garden waste out for the food bins. I had a few questions over the options, because obviously platted properties don't have the brown bins, so I'll assume that they will still be using their grey food caddies. And I think it would be interesting to see what the cost implications would be of that. And obviously I'm not aware of the logistics of lorries and their capacity, and at the moment I can't remember the name of the company, but it's a private company that lifts the grey food caddies, that we lift the boxes, garden waste. I'm just thinking that the two that are being suggested here, the food and the garden, being commingled, but at the moment they're two separate operators that do that. So that's one of the things that I think we need more information on. As I say, I do care for the environment, and I believe we all should and are moving as fast down that road as we could, but also care for residents. And as has been alluded to by Councillor Nicholl, the capacity of the box, which was the first thing that sprung to my mind when I saw the motion, does concern me somewhat. As I say, the capacity of it and the design of it, because the original black box that we've got, I think, slightly smaller than that, or at least it seems that way when I'm putting all my wine bottles in it. Same size. Is it the same? Is it? Okay.
Please don't say the bigger box.
I must admit, I haven't often picked it up and measured it for that anyway. So I'll take
you
it.
Not drink their wine out of cardboard boxes anyway.
Sorry?
Do you not drink their wine out of cardboard boxes anyway?
We'll strike that one from the record.
Good to see you ask for it.
I'll deal with that comment later. But I do think that, as I say, the other thing is the design of the boxes, because that lid isn't hinged. If there is capacity issues, which I believe there will be, irrespective, as I say, you can't squash down cans, although you can obviously with your plastic bottles and things, but although not many people do it, at least not in my house. The design of it, the lids blow away from these boxes, and I think once that lid's off, we're going to have the issue with a lot of refuse blowing up and down the street. As I say, that's one of my main concerns about that. I have seen designs, and I can't remember where it is, I think it's somewhere, that they actually had flexible...
Just to know if it's happening in the wind.
Flexibles. I know, I can't concentrate. We're watching the double act up here.
Trying to find out the capacity.
Oh right, okay. There was flexible lids with elasticated things on them, and I don't know whether or not that might be more practical. But it just, as I say, the capacity is the one thing that does concern me. And I get what you're saying about the DRS scheme, but I think the way the DRS scheme is looking at the moment is that if we bring this in now, there are a lot of unanswered questions on the DRS scheme. I'm aware that the government does want to bring it in, but as to who's paying for it, who's running it, the logistics of it, I think, mean that at least 2 years before we get that, which means that we're introducing something now, and it's very short-termist. That's all my comments.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Sorry, you can't switch me off.
Okay. How's that? No? Mrs. Geisler.
When, in fact, could this system be implemented with knowing the costs, etc.?
Are we talking about the DRS system or
This system that
this new scheme? Well, what members are being asked to do today, if I understand correctly, is that we have to go away and cost this up and bring this back to the next meeting, and then members can decide if this is the one that they want to go for. What we would then have to do is we would have to put in a bid to Zero Waste Scotland for funding to deliver this. So that would be, we wouldn't get funding for vehicles, but we get funding for, that would be the boxes. Then after we got that back from Zero Waste Scotland, we would report back to members, and then members would take a final decision. So we're a good few months away from actually deciding that we want to do this, if this is what we decide to want to do. And then it would have to be implemented. We'd have to procure the boxes, and then we'd have to obviously alter the contract that we currently have with our current provider.
Mrs. Gadget, bring this back with the other two options, and then we make a decision on what option we take forward to Zero Waste.
Councillor Alexander.
Sorry, I don't think Mrs. Geisler was finished.
No, I'm just saying that Zero Waste Scotland take bids at particular times of the year, so we need to understand when the next bidding round goes around. But we'll include that in the report that we bring back to next meeting.
Yeah, thank you for that. We've just approved a commitment to, it's going to probably the largest commitment out with the schools projects that we've ever undertaken as a local authority. This service is £1 million overspent. We've got to bring that figure under control. We've got to bring that figure down as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we can't deliver other commitments that we've made, even this morning. So it is important that when we look at this, we look at it with a critical eye. We need to become compliant in relation to the refuse collection service. We need to ensure that we're seen to be compliant as well as actually being compliant, because the Zero Waste Scotland are still an important player in this particular front. So I'm happy to support the motion. I think it gets us on a track that we need to be, and allows us the ability to judge various schemes against each other in a way that the powers can't do at the moment, because we don't have all the facts and figures.
Okay, thanks. Could I just say the one thing obvious to me that jumps out at me is the bin or the box hasn't got wheels. Now, how on earth in this day and age, moving forward, can somebody with an infirmity or a disability take that full of bottles and cans doesn't it drive?
It's not going to be full of bottles and cans. It's not going to have any glass in it.
Right, so what's it going to have?
It's going to be the lightest of
plastic
boxes.
bottles.
Plastic.
Nevertheless, well, fair point, but nevertheless, if you've got an infirmity or a disability, I think you would agree it should have wheels on it.
The black box over the moment doesn't.
I know that's why most people don't use them. I certainly. But let's be honest and say this is a new proposal coming forward. It's about the 4th or 5th time this administration's looked at this situation. 4th if it's not the 5th. Make it the 4th. That is unsuitable for somebody that's got an infirmity. Straightforward. How would an elderly person take that full of stuff down the drive?
Convener, is it not the case at the moment people with infirmity do get rear door collections?
Yeah. But people with infirmity can put their stuff in the blue bin at the minute and it's on wheels. This is us moving forward now. At the minute, people with infirmity can take, somebody that doesn't need a black door collection but can take their bin out and put it on wheels, they can do that. Are we going to increase the amount of people getting back door collections for this? Because that's going to put costs up as well.
Do you have an alternative?
Pardon?
Do you have an alternative?
I have got an alternative. I might not move it. They might wait to see what you've got to do. What I'm also saying is, to be fair to Councillor Gardner said, or hinted at, if you fill that one quick, then you can get another one. So the person with infirmity is going to have 2 boxes there. Doesn't it make sense?
If they've got an infirmity, they're unlikely to be collecting that amount of rubbish.
Not a rear door collection.
If they do, you've got rear door collection.
know them all. That's what I'm saying. So you'd be happy to increase the raised door collection for people
If
with the 2 bins? If necessary.
If people with infirmity.
Well, fine, if that's your commitment. Anyway, what would be asked to you, Councillor Gardner?
Convener, I'm sorry.
Councillor Gardner, you want to wind up?
Sorry, Councillor.
Right, my apologies.
I'm at the wrong side here.
It's the wrong side of that man.
The left.
Total agreements with what Councillor Alexander says. There is a £1 million overspend. What we can't do is do nothing. We need to get to a solution where that reduces, and 3 or 4 options at the moment. Can we know, see if there's land with wheels in them and come back to the price? Does it cost anything for to get information much as what it costs?
I don't think a box has ever been made. I've maybe wrong at that size, refusing it. That's what's made that size.
You get it buying in the shops.
No.
So it can be done.
I think it can be done.
I think we
can
should.
I ask for that to be run back the same as the report?
Yes, we do.
That might be no. But you can get them in the high street. Also, when we do go to whatever option we pick, I don't know if we still get the signs made for on the bins, if it goes on what. When they were getting stuck on it first, they were very helpful for constituents of mine, so they know exactly what goes in what bin. Not everybody pays attention to it, but if we give them the opportunity to do it, it might help with the compliance.
One of the things that we always include in our bid to Zero Waste Scotland is money for materials and a publicity campaign, so that would produce the stickers that you've spoken about, and also we would have a campaign to make sure that residents were aware of the changes. So, yes.
Okay, anybody else? Just sorry, Gary, and then
I appreciate all the talk about wheels and bits and pieces, and I understand it because I've heard the technicalities getting into before. I think it's more the proposal of what we're doing. I appreciate looking at the potential of whether there's one with wheels, but that's a conversation really for Rona to look at and come up with that detail. I think it's more the proposal and the indication of what we're proposing that we do is probably more important than getting down to the minutiae of the actual wheels on it, which can obviously can come through later. And I agree with Councillor Kerr on the detailing on the bins themselves to help people when they're using them in the future.
Yeah. Councillor Nicholl, you want to speak?
The story of bin collections has been littered with things caused by this council not listening to the public and not taking the public with us. And you yourself, convener, just said that you don't use some of the bins. And one of our colleagues, I always remember, said that the biggest use in his area for these black bins was as children's toy boxes. So we are happily, I think, singing off the same hymn sheet that to do nothing is not an option. But before there is a commitment, I still have great misgivings about the size of this, and certainly I would really be looking for some sort of trial pilot or something just to show people, and hopefully through the Falkirk Herald will advertise the fact that the proposal coming forward is for such a small container for cans, plastics and cartons. And if I'm wrong, but looking at other people's, my neighbours when they're on holiday and that, I think they're pretty much the same as me, so I'll be surprised if I'm wrong, convener, but as always, happy to admit if I am. So I would certainly be looking for some sort of pilot so that people, before we commit large amounts of money, so that people can see just what this proposal is. And I think that would be prudent. We have to take people with us. We have to get them knowing that this is the proposal, and I would certainly, if necessary, move that a pilot be done.
The option, first of all, Councillor Nicholas, to undertake an analysis of the final options to come back with a report. Happy to wait till
At that stage, I'll move again that a pilot be done unless the administration takes my comments on board.
Yeah. Councillor Coombs, you've already spoken,
I
right?
know, it's just a simple question. Sorry, I'm just thinking we're talking about the capacity, and rather than looking at an extra box, I wonder if the director would come back to us with costings on not doing it 4 weekly, if it was collected fortnightly, because obviously that addresses the capacity issue as well, because I think a month's worth in a small container or a fortnight's worth in a small.
We'll have to look at the issue of capacity. As Councillor Gardner says, it's moving. We will have to have regard to the current situation, albeit I think everyone would expect that come DRS, what will be collected curbside will be significantly reduced. So I think that's where the flexibility is coming from. So we will have to consider that when we bring the report back to the next meeting.
The regularity of the collections could address that. You could do it fortnightly at the moment until we see whether the DRS is working and whether people actually buy into returning their plastics or not.
Okay, Councillor Meikle John.
Thank you, Convener.
Sorry.
We have to. Sorry. I think the point's been made that we have to get to a decision on this because there is a significant impact on the budget. So if there are other proposals, if there are other suggestions, it's much better we know about them now and we can get them worked on and brought forward than come back to a meeting in 1 month, 2 months' time and have yet a further proposal brought forward. Because we need to get to a point where we make a final decision and move and actually implement something in order to actually be able to get the spend under control here. So if you have suggestions, Convener, I would urge you to actually share those so that we can get them costed, so we can get them out in the open and see if there is a better alternative. Because I know how hard Paul has worked on this. I know every commutation possible that Ross and Paul have looked at about how we can actually deliver something that is affordable and acceptable to the public. And you can't get something that's going to please everybody, we know that, but we do need to do something. So if there are other suggestions, if there's better ideas, happy that we'll look at them, but we need to do it now and we can't keep going back from this side.
Yeah, that's good. We'll bring forward a proposal to the next meeting, but I would just remind you what you did say in your manifesto. It says, an example is Falkirk Council's refuse collection service. This is badly stretched and suffers from failure of the current administration to establish a strategy and then implement that strategy. You have had 3 or 4 goes at this and you've still not got the strategy right yet. Councillor Alexander, you've already spoken. Councillor Gardner, does anybody want to speak that hasn't already spoken? Councillor Bizzard, you're right in, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I would just like, on the deposit return scheme, I would just like to ask if will that be fully funded by the Scottish Government or will there be financial implications for Falkirk Council?
As it's a very early stage, but we're not anticipating that local authorities will be involved in funding this. Our expectation, and this is caveated with the fact that we are at an early stage of this, our expectation is that it will be either funded by government or somehow those the shops that will be involved in the process might somehow be involved in that funding. But it's really too early to say. But at the moment, we're not expecting that local authorities will impact on local authorities' finances.
Yep.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Convener. I was actually elected 3 years ago to the day, and as soon as I was elected, I more or less walked straight into a PDP panel looking at options to bring forward. Both the SNP opposition at the time and the administration at the time, the Labour group, brought forward 2 proposals that would have taken us down this road to be charter compliant and would have addressed some of the cost, in my opinion. They were both rejected by the then administration, so that was 3 years ago that happened. So DRS has been a game changer, and I think Mrs Geisler and Ross would both agree it's been a game changer in the last few months, or probably the last 8-10 months, something like that, maybe even a year. And that's made it really difficult to look at the situation we find ourselves in just now. But what everybody here, Councillor Kerr, Councillor Alexander, everybody has alluded to is the £1 million overspend. We need to address that, and we need to address it soon. That's why in my motion I've said this is the final option, because we have covered all the options out there. This is the final option. We need to get this back, we need to do something, we need to do it now. So the next executive is when we make a decision, or you make a decision, we as a body make a decision, and we get somewhere with this and address this situation.
Okay, thanks for that. Moving on now to item 8, which is local governance review. Mr Ritchie.
Thank you, Convener. There are two particular pieces of background to this report. The first date back to December last year, when the leaders of the council suggested a PDP could be established to finish the work on the review of the current scheme of establishment of community councils. It was also suggested at that time that that panel could take cognizance of the local governance review. The second piece of background to this report is the motion by Councillor Reid to the last council meeting asking officers to investigate the possibility of establishing area committees and a petition committee. Council agreed in June to explore both of these issues through a panel established to look at community councils, with the report being brought to this committee. My report goes on at section 3 to talk about the local governance review, which was launched in December of last year. Phase 1 and 2 of the review were launched more recently. Phase 1 of the review is a widespread community engagement exercise. Phase 2 seeks to engage public sector bodies on how improvements can be made in local democracy. Responses, as noted in the report, are required to be submitted by mid-December in writing. A note in section 3.7 of the report calls for looking to develop national approach around what the local asks may be from this engagement, and those asks are around fiscal empowerment and devolution of powers. Clearly, there are links between the Local Governance Review and the Community Empowerment Act. Section 4 of the report provides members with an update on these various strands. I won't go into details of the updates, since members considered a report on the Community Empowerment Act in June, just before the recess. The Local Governance Review provides the opportunity for councils to look at local democracy in a broader sense, with issues such as petitions committee and area committees part of that process. The composition of the PDP in terms of the remit is set out at section 4.6 of the report. The timetable that's suggested for the panel to follow is set out in section 4.7 of the report, with the expectation that the panel of members will meet before the end of the month. Interim recommendations would be reported back to the executive at the end of November in good order to allow a response to be submitted by the council to the government and COSLA by the deadline of mid-December. The recommendations, Convener, are set out in section 2 of the report. Happy to answer any questions members have.
Thanks for that, Mr Ritchie. The chair of the PDP has to be the portfolio holder. So, any comments on anything in the report?
Convener, I would wish to speak to the report.
Yeah.
Thank you. Following the agreement for the Policy Development Panel, as has been outlined by Mr Ritchie, around community councils and to look at boundaries, the Scottish Government also launched its consultation on the review of local governance and to look at how we engage with communities, involve them within the democratic decision making of the council. And this is a part of what we need to do. We need to respond to the consultation, and we also want to actually say what we are doing within Falkirk to actually engage with our communities. Council is also tasked with making 1% of this budget available to communities to decide on how to use it as part of participatory budgeting, and that is something that I think needs to be developed further in order to make it meaningful. The motion submitted to Council by Councillor Reid to form a petitions committee and introduce area committees both require terms of reference and how these would actually operate and fit in with our overall decision making within the council. Would need to be looked at again in order for any of that engagement to actually be meaningful and influence council as we go forward. These areas are all intrinsically linked, including the review of local governments. It therefore makes sense to bring it all together and look at it in line with the council's decision-making structures, and that would be part of what the PDP would be tasked with doing. So I'm therefore proposing that the PDP will have the wide remit as is set out in 4.6. It's a wide range that's to be considered by the PDP, and the timescales are ambitious. But that means very much it would remain focused, and there would be significant more work to be done following the outcomes of that PDP, but it gives us an opportunity to start. So I therefore moved the following motion, which I give a copy of, to agree to the creation of a policy development panel to consider the local governance review with the remit set out as 4.6 in the report. Agree that the composition of the policy development panel be 5, comprised of 2 SNP, 2 Labour and 1 Conservative, as in line with standing orders, and that the leader of the council as a portfolio holder be the chair of that PDP.
Second.
Second and reserve the right.
Want to wait and see the motion, or do you want to? Anybody any comments to make? Okay, that's agreed. Thank you. Next item is agenda item 9, which is review of taxes, scales and other charges. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Convener. This follows on from a report that was considered at the June meeting of the Executive, when the Executive agreed for consultation a number of changes to the taxi fare scales, principally in relation to the running mile and also to the flag line, the cost of entering a taxi for the first time. There have been some responses to the public consultation, which was advertised in local newspapers and also on the Council's website. There were 6 consultation responses in total. 5 of those were broadly negative in relation to the proposed increases, and the substance of the consultation responses are set out in Appendix 1 to the report. The matters raised are also addressed within the body of the report itself, and some response provided by officers. Possibly the most cogent of the comments on the proposal came from someone who responded in relation particularly to petrol increases, pointing out that fuel increases have varied and fluctuated during the 5-year period since the fares were last increased. I think the important contextual point there is that there are more costs on the taxi trade than simply fuel costs, principally in relation to the Council's change in policy on vehicle specification, which has required progressively more modern vehicles to be introduced into the taxi fleet, and we've been specifically required by the Traffic Commissioner to take that into account when we're determining taxi fares. I think also more broadly, looked at in the round the fare increase which is proposed, the first in 5 years, is broadly consistent with general inflationary pressures in the wider economy. That's, I think, all I would propose to say. Convener, the consultation responses are before you. It's also appropriate to note this is a report where the public protection portfolio holders, the relevant portfolio holders, so Councillor Murtagh would have the opportunity to speak to the board.
Yep, thanks for that. Councillor Murtagh.
Thank you for that. I feel I've disturbed the delicate balance around the table this morning here. But nonetheless, I thank Colin for outlining the basis of the recommendations. And of course, where I still member of the executive will now remove them on behalf of our group. The report updates, as Colin was saying, about the consultation responses which were received following the decision of the executive in June, which went out to public consultation and also was discussed with trade through the taxi forum, also highlighted that consultation process. I highlighted back in June the importance of the context, that has been 5 years since any increase was implemented to the taxi tariff, and I do emphasise that point again, that had, and it's in the report, that had that cumulative inflationary increase been applied over that time, we would indeed be proposing a higher rate today, which we're not. I would again stress that this is the maximum tariff which taxi drivers can pass on to their customers and does not represent an obligation to do so. But increasing the maximum tariff remains the only way that taxi drivers can obtain a wage increase for themselves. And we do have taxi drivers in very varying situations, and we have to be mindful of that and balance needs for everyone. Likewise, I'd like to also highlight that this will increase take Falkirk, who are currently 32nd out of 32 local authorities in terms of the cost for a 2 mile journey, and we will still be within the bottom third with other councils still possibly considering increases. For illustrative purposes, as I gave in June, it would still mean that on that 2 mile journey we would still be 17 pence cheaper than our neighbours in West Lothian, 27 pence cheaper than in Stirling, 37 pence cheaper in Kilmarnock, and £1.17 cheaper than our neighbours in Fife. I'm not going to, I think Councillor Coombe has left the group, so I'm not going to give my preferences for perhaps relaxation purposes, but if I was to, from the village in the earth, visit an establishment in Kincardine, perhaps it would cost me possibly about £1.50 more coming back than it would going over, and that wouldn't just be because of the enjoyment which I have obtained there. But nevertheless, that is the context, and I think it's very important to illustrate that. And of course we are all concerned with the effect on taxi users and setting a fair pay scale, which is why I've illustrated these examples, but our legal obligations are also to maintain a viable taxi trade, and government guidance is very clear on that which we have to consider there. I believe that this is the approach the officers have undertaken, and following the consultation I believe that the changes we're proposing reflect this fair pay scale for the public, and are also necessary to ensure the viability of the trade within the guidance, which is very clear and which I read out in full in June. I don't want to repeat that here today. I would note also for members that there's currently the PTP on taxi licensing, which I chair, which is running and is working very well, making good progress. And we're discussing a variety of issues, and one of them will be to both look at the specification, which Colin mentioned, as one of the factors in terms of the cost which taxi drivers have to consider now in terms of their capital costs for investing in their vehicles is higher than what it was, much higher than what it was 5 years ago, and that's something which we'll be looking at in the PDP, but we'll also be looking at regularising this process which we have now in terms of setting the taxi tariffs, so we don't have to come to this sort of increase again. As I say, I can't myself move the report and the recommendations, so I hand over to my colleagues to do so, but very much in support of the recommendations in the report.
Thanks for that.
Convener, I would like to propose.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes. Anyone, any points? Are you going to say that?
Second.
Fine, thanks. Anyone, any questions or points to make on the report? Councillor Bizzard.
Convener, I think that it's long overdue. It's been 5 years since the last review, and I agree with Councillor Murtagh today, and I think we should go forward with this.
Anyone else? Councillor Nicholl.
It was just a comment, Convener. There were concerns when the changes came into force on this committee that portfolio holders wouldn't be given their place or allowed to contribute. I think Laura just proved thereby, with a very eloquent way she put this across, that wasn't an ill-founded concern, and that portfolio holders are always welcome to come and speak to the executive and make the case.
Yep. Anyone else? Anything? Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, I point out that Councillor Murdoch's not entitled to take the full review that's required for this. She's not allowed to vote, for example. That is a crucial element in relation to the work of the portfolio holders. The portfolio holder cannot support their own proposals by way of a vote. That is not full consultation. With regards to the report itself, can I say that we also have to look at very much the ratio of cabs per head of the population, and that impacts quite significantly on the ability of the owners or the lease holders to actually make a living. So the whole package is something that we have to look at and consider. This is a very good start, and I think that the Councillor Bissett has probably summed it up perfectly, I think, in terms of what we're all thinking with regards to this issue. So, full marks to Councillor Murdoch, but to say that she had a full opportunity to see her report through is not quite accurate.
That's political balance for you. Anyone else? Any other comment?
Jenny Manning.
Sorry, Councillor Alexander.
Sorry,
Were you side there? What was it?
I said the light won't go off.
Oh, it did say something. It said gerrymandering.
Yes.
You shouldn't say things if no one later admit it, you know. Okay, so let's move on. Thanks for that.
It's a bit rich.
It's really rich. Thanks for that. Capital programmes outrun.
So which I do not now have.
Councillor Smale.
Well,
I've got water on the brain here, there's water going through the roof.
Thank you, Director.
I think you'd be a perfect use for that.
You could try and rot in the brain, mate.
Yes, Convener. This is the outturn report 18, subject, of course, to audit, which is live at the moment. The previous meeting of Executive received the equipment report for revenue back in June. The positions summarised in the little table at para 411, and that's exploded in more detail, as we'll see later in the report. Paragraphs 413, picking up the general fund first, take each of the service areas and give an overview of the main projects undertaken in those service areas. I won't dwell on those, you can obviously read what's there. 4.2 picks up on the resources, as will be evident from the content there. The vast majority of that is Scottish Government grant, but that's supplemented by other elements, capital financial current revenue, other external grants, with the balance needing funded picked up by borrowing. So in 4.3, and in particular the table 4.3.1, we take forward the balance shown at the beginning of the report and relate it to the position last reported to Executive in earlier in the year, and that's showing an increase in slippage of a fraction over 3 million. That then is explained in the larger table at 4.3.2, and as you can see, there's quite a few components across the service portfolio responsible for deriving that figure. I think, as we have recognised in previous reports, slippage is an inherent feature of capital programmes, but notwithstanding that, we would like to feel we had a better control on it. And to that end, as noted at para 433, we've commissioned internal audit as an independent agent to undertake a review of the processes with a view to learning lessons which we can apply going forward. That review is live at the moment, and a future report update members on what came out of that review. So that's the overall position on the general fund. Section 4.5 picks up in the HRA, the other big spending block. There's a variance of 1.7 million over there, which is, I suggest, fairly marginal given the scale of the programme. And similar to the format in the general fund section, from 453 on, each of the major spend areas is outlined. And the first one at 453, elemental improvements, very much in terms of scale dwarfs the rest of them. And again, in terms of how that's all funded, that's summarised in para 4.6 or section 4.6 in terms of resources, noting there that the end of the right to buy scheme and the surge of applications that inevitably came in with that deadline, they've spilled over into 17-18 and were responsible for contributing quite a significant sum to the overall funding position. We're required under the Prudential Code to produce a set of prudential indicators designed to give comfort the capital programme spend is operating within prudent boundaries, and there's various indicators used to give comfort on that fact, and they're set out Appendix 4. Section 4.8 just picks up on the strong interrelationship between capital investment and the Treasury side of the House, particularly in terms of borrowing and the position there, reflecting what was already reported to members in terms of the Treasury strategy position, just knitting the two elements, capital and Treasury, together. The final section, 4.9, deals with the capital reserves. First one in 4.9.1 is capital receipts, primarily sale of assets, and you can see in the table the component elements there and the balance. And of course, regard will be taken to those available resources when we roll forward the capital programme, which is live at the moment and will come before you in due course. And the other reserve at 495 is grants, primarily section 75, and the same point pertains there in terms of potentially harnessing elements of that to help finance the capital programme. So, just jumping back to the recommendations at the front of the report, which I can get there, is effectively inviting you to note the position on the three elements: the outturn for general fund and capital, noting the reduced external borrowing, reflecting the slippage, and noting the potential indicators. Thank you, Lena.
Thanks for that, Mr. Smale.
Ms. Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. This is at the outturn report, and we're looking back. But in looking back, it's good to be able to reflect and take stock of where we are. There has been recurring problems over a number of years now with significant slippage within the capital programme. We've also looked to mitigate that with a number of shovel-ready projects. However, we still seem to not be getting things as good as it could be. And I think it's heartening that we've got into the programme of the internal audit to look at that, to see how we can look at doing things better. We need to get better at ensuring that we do get a capital programme on target as much as possible. There's always going to be some slippage, just the sheer nature of works that aren't within our control. On many occasions that's expected, but there's areas where I think we could do much better. I also think we need to look at a priority list of shovel-ready projects to make sure that those are deliverable when we do have some slippage. However, I wouldn't want to overlook what we actually have achieved within the general fund at 28.3 million spend, and within the housing capital programme at 32.9 million, because that is the key, that what we actually have delivered and what has been put on the ground, and quite quite physically in this case and in many cases. But I'm happy that we accept the outturn report subject to audit, and that we do take a reflective look at how we have performed, and to continually strive to look at doing things a bit better. Thank you.
Okay,
second and reserve the right to come back in.
Right, okay. Anyone any comments to make on that? Councillor Bizzard.
Then I would just like to ask on 4.35, the 1.69 million that was allocated for upgrade of Bainsford Day Centre. It says the funding will be used to fund other potential capital projects and services, day services for younger adults. I just wondered if the administration could give us any indication as to what these services may be.
There's a number of projects being taken through the Integrated Joint Board that are looking at the service redesign and including some capital investment within the existing centres. That I'm sure that the programme will be made available through the Integrated Joint Board.
Okay, Councillor Nicholl.
I'll change my name again.
One of these days.
Just a quick question in relation to page 80 in the New Cairn Grange High School. It states here that there's been an overspend of some 336,000, and I also note that it's been fully funded. I'm just wondering what the cause was for the overspend.
Happy to get a detailed answer for you, Councillor Nicholl, but I think it's probably to do with Nimmo. My apologies. Probably due to a profiling issue in terms of the way that the project was managed over the course of the 3 years. I'll get you a detailed answer.
Anyone else? Just on item 459, local housing schemes. We've got a spend of 2.3, 1.4 million below the budget of 3.7 million. So we are 1.4 million below the budget, because you don't spend your budget. And that's similar in line with, well, it's no similar in line figures wise, but I mean the SNP nationally have spent £500 million less in the national budget below on housing. So it doesn't look good. We prefer it's a three-year housing budget that we brought in. You're working to that, so we're disappointed to find that it's got an underspend on it.
Convener, there's a number of projects that were delayed, and that was within the Council's own gift and indeed members' own gift, I believe. Within that, I do know that there is one programme of remodelling of flatted properties coming forward, that there's been a number of schemes looked on with regard to feasibility. Finally have something that has been brought forward, and we anticipate that will be brought to members in the very near future. But there are a number of areas where it wasn't within housing's control, it was other parts of the Council.
Yep, still disappointing. Mr. Alexander?
Yeah, just as I was disappointed with the Labour executive when they sent back to Westminster £1 billion in unspent, unclaimed
what year was that? Just begin that year again?
Sorry?
How long ago was that?
Well, it was 99, 2000.
We're talking about this council.
Yeah.
We're talking about you.
And if you let me finish.
Certainly.
If you let me finish. The issue of carry forward, and this is what effectively we're looking at, is carry forward, is an opportunity, for example, for the local authority to look at its premises, look at its priorities, and to bring much needed capital investment to the shovel-ready projects that are important. But if we're talking about disappointment, we can't be disappointed with 35 million that the local authority will receive from the Scottish Government for building the new houses, when over the period of your own party's rule in Holyrood we received not one brown penny for local authority properties. So I think we can put that in perspective. We can also put in perspective the additional resources that are available for void properties through the private sector to bring new life to our town centres, and the fact that for the first time there was money available, which we'll be certainly bidding for as part of that particular process. So I'm not disappointed with that. In relation to the financial position we're in at the moment, we haven't underspent our budget. The budget is still there, the projects are still there. It's a question of timing, as you know, Mr. Goldie, because the issue is not a new one. It's one that's been with us for as long as you and I have been in local government together, and that's a considerable length of time. I cannot recall any of our reports which indicate that the budget was fully utilised when it was supposed to be utilised. There's always been an issue with regards to carry forward and the availability of the final contract to sign off capital projects as and when we want them. Circumstances dictate the events, and circumstances dictate which projects can get immediate go ahead, which projects require additional pieces of work. Perhaps it's land ownership, perhaps it's the issues pertaining to planning. We don't know. Let's look at individual applications together. But what I would say is this is not a new issue. It's an issue that has affected every administration that has ever been in this. But in terms of the levels of disappointment, I'm certainly not disappointed with the additional resources that went to the HRA, for example, from central government.
Nevertheless, it says during 2017-18, spend of 2.3 million was incurred, which is 1.4 million below the budget of 3.7 million. So as an underspend. So anyone else that hasn't spoken?
List yourself.
Anyone else that hasn't spoken? Okay, can we move on then? Fine. We'll move on to the projection 2018-19. Mr. Smale.
Yes, thanks, Convener. This is the first projection report for the current financial year on revenue. One for capital will follow at the next meeting. So, dealing first with the General Fund in section 4.1, in particular the overview position at 4.12, where the figures show an overspend relative to budget resources of 5.380, but as the narrative notes, 1 million of that relating to grant actually is a technical adjustment, so it somewhat distorts the position. So the true position is 1 million below that, i.e. just over 4 million. The content of para 413 takes each of the service areas in turn, gives you their position at a description at the top relative to budget, and explanatory narrative supporting that. There's two I'll mention. The first one is with respect to social work under children's services, where there is a significant projected overspend of in the order of 3 million, and the other one chimes with the content earlier in the agenda in terms of development service and position areas, where we're just short of 1 million projected overspend by the end of the financial year. There's nothing in the other elements there that I particularly want to draw members' attention to. We, as a standard content at 4.3, give you some metrics on workforce changes, redeployment, severance, headcount, etc. And you can see the data from that set out in that section. We then turn in 4.4 to the housing revenue account, council housing in other words, and positions outlined there, and essentially this big spending area over 60 million finished the year in line with budget. It holds its own reserve, as you can see at 442, and the level of that reserve is pretty much consistent with the position across Scottish local authorities. Flowing from the General Fund budgetary position, we pick up the implications in terms of reserves in section 4.5, and obviously there's the backlog to that members will be familiar with by now in terms of an approved strategy and an agreed range for the general fund of roughly 6.5 to 11 million as a guideline range for within which we look to operate. The Appendix 1, which summarises the position, is showing a projected general fund reserve balance position of just over 8 million at the end of the financial year. Clearly, we're quite early in the current financial year, and a lot of water can flow under the bridge before we get to 31st of March. As noted there, we highlight possible calls, and potentially quite significant calls, on the reserve. One example is the historic child abuse situation. We're also noting that all pay claims across the spectrum are still to be finalised, and were these ultimately to be settled at a level beyond what we'd assumed in the budget, and given that pay is our largest element of cost, that clearly would have significant implications. The report also flags up quite a significant tilt in the Council's financial position, reflecting the projected overspend. And what sits behind that is a scenario whereby in recent years we've become used to aggregate underspending on the general fund. And what that's meant is that the fairly high level of reserve that we've used over recent years to help balance the budget is in effect refreshed or replenished by that underspending, and it brings it back. It's what you might call a benign cycle. The overspend, the significant overspend flagged up in this report, which is expected to be robust and hold to the end of the financial year, takes us into a different territory, one that will very much limit our room for manoeuvre and constrain members' capacity to help balance the budget by the deployment of the general fund reserve. And as the report notes, this very much chimes with the position that the Accounts Commission in Northern Scotland reported in their last overview report. They were referring to other councils and essentially saying you can't keep deploying that level of reserves because your reserves will go. Well, we are nudging into that territory, so it's a cautionary warning as to a tightening of the Council's financial position, which we need to have regard to going forward and take vigorous steps to make sure we manage our budgets consistent with the funds that are available. So that's the main reserve, but we do have other reserves, as you're aware. 454 sets out the position with the Repairs and Renewals Fund, and as you can see from the content there are a number of strands to that, spread across a wide range of services. Then we come to our suite of earmarked reserves, which involve school management, economic development, etc., insurance fund. There's a revenue grants one there, and that's just really taking account of timing issues before spend and resources are aligned. Machines running a wobbly.
Always better with a hard copy.
Always better with a hard copy thing. I do have a hard copy working somewhere. Never rely on technology, perhaps as a lesson there. We're near the end of the report anyway. So, as I say, there's those latter group of earmarked reserves, and as the title suggests, set up for a particular purpose. I think just jumping back to the recommendations at the front of the report, again inviting you to note the projected position at the end of the financial year, also noting the position with reserves, and on the back of my comments about the budgetary position, recommendation 3 inviting the executive to instruct service directors to take appropriate actions to maintain costs within the approved budget.
Thanks for that, Mr. Smale. Ms. Maple-John.
Thank you, Convener. This is the first financial position of the new financial year, first quarter. It's early days, but it's clear that we need to have robust financial monitoring and that there's very little flexibility within the budget. We have a projected budget gap of 60 million over the next 3 years, with around 30 million for this coming financial year. As has been detailed in the papers, where we have a projected overspend, I've put in place a monitoring programme with portfolio holders, where we're working very closely with the directors and the services to support them in bringing their individual service budgets in on target and seeking to mitigate where pressures appear. With particular focus on children's services, we've again seen an increase in looked after and accommodated children with complex needs that have resulted in high cost care packages. A strategy to look at an alternative model of delivery closer to home, accompanied with a focus of early detection and intervention, has been developed. This is being supported through Council of the Future and now needs to be prioritised and the programme escalated. While this is expected to assist with reducing the projected overspend and continuing within this area, the aim is to reduce the number of children needing high levels of intervention through the early intervention and detection where there's a requirement for a child to be accommodated, that it also is done closer to home. This has been demonstrated in a majority of cases that this affects a better outcome for the child, and it has been carried out in a number of other council areas very effectively. There is significant savings that can be made in progressing this particular strategy. However, it does need the support of the whole council in order to be able to do that, as it is a change in the way that we actually operate. In doing that, it has taken longer than expected. In doing that, we have to make sure that it is taken forward in a managed way. So certainly the portfolio holders have already arranged meetings with the various directors, and will be continuing over the months to progress that. We also have instigated our budget programme again, and there is a date in the diary, if I remember, Mr Ritchie, that for a budget working group to meet. Something like that. We've had a little respite over the summer recess, but we're back into budgets, and as ever, there are always going to be challenges. There are many calls on the resources, and those have to be managed. And Mr Smales just highlighted the limited capacity of our reserves. So that all has to be taken into account during the deliberations, and it's everyone's responsibility in doing that, and therefore move the report as set out in recommendations.
Yeah, seconded, and obviously reserve the right to comment if required.
Anybody any comments? If not, then you approve the report. Fine, thanks for that. Next item. Statement of delegated powers, pages 101 to 109.
Thank you, Convener. It's a very brief report for information only. Provides information on 2 decisions taken during the summer recess.
Does anyone need to be further informed? If not, then before I close the meeting, could I just say that there's a new chief executive, Mr Laurie here. I'm quite sure he enjoyed the meeting. It's given me some things more colourful, but thank everyone for their perseverance today, and thanks members of the public that came along, and members and officers for their attendance. Thank you.